Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to do a little brief walk around and show you some of the things that are in flower here in the middle, I guess almost mid to late March at this point. And a few of the things that actually have been damaged by some cold in recent couple of weeks. We had that cold that everybody had back in December where the temperature dropped very rapidly, had a little damage on a few things at that point, but not too bad. And then it just got warm and stayed warm, and this entire garden woke up, you know, really, really early. And now we've had, I think, 6 nights out of the last probably 14 or so that have been at or below freezing, right around freezing as we wake up in the morning. We've been lucky on a couple of them where the breeze has kind of not died down during the night, so frost hadn't settled on things. But a couple nights ago we had a 28 and it did knock some things back. Kind of was expected. Not a whole lot you can do about that. My blueberries seem to have survived it, and so the flowers are still intact. In fact, I had a bee over here on this one before we turned on the camera, but the blueberries were one of the concerning things as to whether or not 28 degrees is getting down toward that temperature where those open flowers can be harmed. This is a couple varieties here that we'll hold off flowering a little while longer, and then I've got a couple of southern high bush varieties up here that not only flowered, but the fruit is forming on them already. Seem to have done fine. Again, some of our species, tulips, daffodils, they're starting to slow down and fade at this point, but other things are taking their place pretty quickly. Got a tiny little Candytuft out here by the road that is putting on a show right now, and it'll get covered up by this butterfly bush behind it as it takes off and again covers it up later in the season. Have another species tulip we haven't shown yet. The first flower that's opened is pretty small there. That one's called Tinka. You can see how showy that is with the kind of a reddish pink and yellow. Again, those flowers open during the day and then kind of close up during the evening. Butterfly bushes were definitely hurt some by the frost and freeze. The native perennials over here, the coneflowers, bee balm, those kinds of things that are kind of close to the ground, weren't harmed at all by any of the late frost. We actually covered this clematis. Clematis are one of the most cold hardy things in the world, but once those flower buds are just about to open on them, I definitely didn't want any frost on them. One thing, so going back to 3 years ago when we started this project, we redid the screen porch on the back of the house, put in that shed back there, talked about, this fencing that was going in the front garden back, up here, and all the plans we had for it. And most of those have taken place, except for we haven't finished the siding on the house because the shutdown happened and things got really expensive. And so we took a break from some of that stuff, from the fence in the back, from putting in, from finishing the siding on the house. This little metal shed roof that's above the steps here, we want to replace with something different. And so those projects are finally about to get underway. So the house itself is going to radically change during hopefully spring and summer season, depending on when contractors that's being contracted out, the siding and some of the issues with some aluminum pieces that are on the house that needs. This is an 80-year-old plus house, and so we're going to be bringing it up to date a bit on the exterior. So we're excited about getting those projects underway. The azaleas that are on the front foundation, we talked about putting in a wide porch across the whole front, and we may eventually still do that. But in the meantime, the changes will happen, and will be the siding, the shutters, that little metal shed roof over the steps will become an A-frame piece above it, so it sheds water. Right now it sheds water directly over top of you when you're walking up the steps, so it'll shed water the correct way. But those azaleas that are along the foundation, which got damaged in the frost the other night, are going to come out. The little planters that were created with some cinder blocks underneath, that's going to come out, and we're going to do a proper foundation planting up there. So that'll be some design and new pieces that'll be going in during the spring season. So pansies are really starting to jump. They were a little slow to get started for us because we had that 13-degree night, which the 13 degrees wasn't that big of a deal. It's just that it was 70 that morning and then 13 that night that really knocked them back. But they're finally looking like they should. They probably should still be a little bit bigger and fuller. at this point, but that's life. Lots of perennials coming back in the garden, and we have planted a ton of perennials. We're a little nervous, you know, because of, you know, that kind of the way the garden got shut down is it just we didn't have any cold all fall. And then we had that event there in December. So a lot of our perennials, unfortunately, went to sleep in a very nasty way. And it's not every one that pops up that you can see new growth coming up on is like a celebration of, okay, that thing survived, that thing survived. A couple of things are marginally hardy here. So, you know, I expect coneflowers and bee balm and some of our natives definitely to come back. But some of our salvias and things that were on the cusp of not being hardy, they're coming back. We are going to leave this in such a way that we can still put the wider porch across the entire front. And that's still the long-term goal with the house. So we're not going to do anything that interrupts our future ability to have a front porch going all the way across this. Damage-wise, the other night we did cover the Indian hawthorn here, and it looks like we have managed to protect the flowers on it. Last year, these got damaged. These get very large pink flowers that are extremely fragrant. Over in this area, not a lot of damage. Distilleum just continues. Some of our distilleum just continues to get damaged. It got damaged in that freeze, and then it had fully leafed out again and got damaged once again. I never worry about lilacs. They're not something I would cover. This is a Korean lilac called Miss Kim. We're a week or so away from it having color on it. It can flower very, very early. I never think about covering it, even though it leaves out early, even though it buds up early. This is a zone 5 hardy plant, and 28 degrees isn't even going to slow it down, and it didn't. So looking forward to the flowers on that. So these spring frosts are just normal. I mean, plants leaf out and they get knocked back. Some things, especially some of our, non-natives tend to leaf out a little earlier. This year, even the natives have a lot of those have woken up way too early as well. So we expect sometimes, every few winters to get new growth on things like this osmanthus. It's going to get covered in new growth, and then the frost is going to get it. The issue this year is that some of these plants were under a lot of stress already. So you're doubling down on, this Alyssium here, which had pretty big damage, from the winter cold, had started to open flowers, had started to put on some new growth here, and then, it got knocked back. So it's getting doubled down on. I do have lots of these species tulips. And I just can't get enough of these species tulips. I want some other varieties out here as well. These are ones that came back from last year, and this is Lady Jane, and they just look so amazing. Again, they close up at the evening, so it's like two different plants during the day. Flowers are wide open like that. You can see all the parts and pieces of the inner part of the flower, and at night they close up and are basically a totally different color. One of the plants that really got nuked by that December freeze was the Calla lilies here. The Calla lilies were up this tall, and on like Steph said, on December 13th they were this big. On December 14th they were at the ground level. They had just become mush overnight, so really didn't know if that was one of those things that was going to come back or not. Just not because it's not hardy, but just because of the way in which it went to sleep. It was a very forced sleep. Most of the deciduous flowering shrubs like the Weigela aren't going to be hurt, by late frost and freezes. Typically, this gold variety is a bit, though. You can see that, some of the most tender new growth on this. Flower buds seem to be fine on it, but it definitely took a bit of a hit. And again, we're taking hits on things that, already had hits. This this Distilleum right here is in more of a protected space than that one is in the front garden, and has not taken as much damage in either event. The one out in the front garden was definitely more affected. Definitely shut down the flowering pretty much on the loropetalum, unless there's some unopened buds on it for the most part. These are done, and it had new growth that was knocked back. Again, I call this a free pruning, right? I didn't have to, all the tips on that osmanthus over there have been pruned back for me. I don't have to put any effort into that. So let's talk about a couple other projects here. This is about to become a patio. We have some We have some old bricks over there on the other side, and I'm just going to kind of put a path that connects these two paths through the middle of the patio. We have stone over here on the side of the house that we've been saving for this patio project. So those two materials are going to kind of be used together. You'll see, you know, how that works. I've got to dig this out a bit, and the greenhouse back here in the corner, this is another project that got started early on in this project that just hasn't been completed. That was just a metal building that we took the skin off of and, you know, left the steel frame in place. I've got lumber that's going around the bottom of it. So it'll have lumber at the bottom. The shade cloth on the top, I have shade cloth I've already purchased for the two end walls. And then it's deep. The inside of that greenhouse has missing about 8 inches of soil right in the bottom of it. I'm going to use the soil that comes out of this turf area and transport it over there. So these two projects will kind of be done simultaneous. I just need this soil for that, and I need this soil out of the way for the patio project. Making the decisions to finish some of these projects right now will allow us also to go back in and finish the landscaping around that space over there that's going to be that greenhouse. The back fence is going to go in. Again, lumber cost is the only reason that I didn't do that, during the shutdown. Lumber just went so high, it just seemed ridiculous to spend 3 or 4 times as much money on lumber to build it. And then that's going to give us the opportunity to finish the landscaping back in that area as well. And we've already started on a redesign over here in the vegetable garden that I put up in a video recently. And then you can see it's actually quite beautiful over there. You can see all the daffodils blooming out in that area. A couple containers we have. There are a couple shrubs going in there. And then that chain link fence is going to be covered as well. And part of those projects are all of these plants that you see on the what will be the patio area. I've got some containers coming, so we're going to have some container planting going on. A couple of these things are going in the ground. A couple of them are going out to other projects as well. So a lot of changes going on, and it's going to wrap up some of these long-term projects that I promised in the very first video I ever put up on this project. And we did a lot of them. We've done a whole lot of them, but there are definitely more. And there's probably a few more things to add. I'll probably put up an additional video as we move forward on getting the siding finished and the house painted and, the front porch changed and this greenhouse and this back fence and this redesign of this vegetable garden. I'll come back in and add some more things that I also have in mind as well. Some smaller details, but probably interesting things for you guys to see here in the garden. So thanks for following along with everything, and we'll be back very soon with another tour video out here as things start to really wake up in the next week or two.